All right, so get this. We're diving into a world with 1.5 billion people.
Wow.
That's how many English speakers there are around the globe, at least according to this podcast we're looking at today.
Okay.
It's all about the benefits of learning English and the impact it can have. And I have to say, the sheer scale of it all is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, 1.5 billion.
Almost 1 in 5 people, on the whole planet.
It really is incredible, the reach that English has. And what's even more interesting to me is how English isn't just this communication tool.
Yeah.
It's really like a gateway to a whole world of opportunities.
Oh, absolutely.
The podcast hosts, Emma and John, I think their names were, they brought up this study that showed people who speak English as a second language can earn, get this, up to 30% more.
30%.
Wow, and that's something worth thinking about.
Yeah, that's huge. A total game changer. It's not just about the money, though, right?
Right.
I was actually reading an article just the other day about how being fluent in English helped this one person land their dream job. It was at a tech startup over in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, they wouldn't have even been considered for the position without those language skills.
Yeah, it makes you realize English is kind of the lingua franca for so many fields these days. Tech, business, science, you name it.
Yeah.
It's like a passport to this whole global network of professionals, innovators,
It really is like tapping into this massive hive mind of ideas and innovations.
Exactly.
Speaking of hive minds, think about all those online learning platforms like Coursera, so many incredible courses.
Oh, yeah.
Taught by, experts from all around the world, but a lot of them, I've noticed, are in English.
Right.
Imagine being able to just access all that knowledge no matter where you are, what your background is.
Yeah. It's a powerful tool for anyone looking to improve themselves or advance their career.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not just limited to formal education. Think about all the online communities out there.
Oh, yeah.
Forums, tons of resources.
All those different groups and stuff.
Dedicated to, hobbies and interests. Or even just connecting with people who share your passion.
Right.
English unlocks that whole world for you.
Okay, so we've talked about how English can open these, serious doors for people.
Yeah.
But let's be real. Learning a new language can be pretty intimidating.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I remember when I first started trying to learn Spanish, the fear of making mistakes. Totally paralyzing.
It's a common hurdle. I think almost everyone faces it at some point.
Yeah.
And it's something that Emma and John actually addressed head on in the podcast.
Oh, really?
They actually kind of challenged that whole idea of mistakes being a bad thing.
Huh.
Their argument was that mistakes are, get this, essential for growth.
Okay.
Each stumble, each grammatical fumble, it's actually like a stepping stone on the path to fluency.
Okay, so more like a learning opportunity then.
Exactly.
Do you think that applies to all learners, or are there some people who are just naturally gifted at languages?
That's a great question.
Because I feel like some people just pick it up so easily.
I know what you mean. It's a big debate, that whole nature versus nurture thing when it comes to languages.
Right.
What's clear from the research, though, is that everyone has the capacity to learn a language.
So it's possible for anyone.
It's more about mindset and approach
Yeah.
than some kind of innate ability.
Okay.
Sure, some people might pick it up faster than others.
Yeah.
But ultimately, consistency and the right strategies, those are key.
I like that. Consistency over talent.
Right.
It feels empowering, like anyone can do it.
It is.
I can also imagine people getting overwhelmed by the sheer number of resources available. I mean, there are apps, courses, language exchange programs. It's a lot to navigate.
Oh, it is. It's definitely information overload out there, especially for someone who's just starting out.
Right.
Emma and John actually gave some really good advice for that.
Oh, yeah. What'd they say?
They emphasize the importance of choosing resources that really align with your own learning style. Some people are visual learners, some are more auditory, some learn best through those hands-on experiences. It's about knowing yourself.
Makes sense. Find what works best for you.
Exactly.
I'm definitely an auditory learner. Podcasts and audiobooks are my jam.
Oh, me too.
But what about people who are more visual? What kind of resources work for them?
So for those visual learners, things like flashcards can be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Visual dictionaries, even watching movies and TV shows with the subtitles on.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about finding those things that click, that make the whole process enjoyable. Because let's face it, if it feels like a chore, you're less likely to stick with it.
Oh, yeah, totally. I remember when I was trying to learn French through these super dry textbook lessons. It was just painful. It wasn't until I started watching French films and listening to French music that things actually started to click for me.
See, and that's a perfect example of what Emma and John were talking about, the power of immersion.
Yeah.
They suggested doing things like, changing your phone settings to English, listening to English music, or even just trying to think in English throughout the day.
Surrounding yourself with the language, even if you're not in an English-speaking country.
Yeah, create that little English bubble around you.
I like that.
Make it part of your daily life.
Okay, so we've talked about the mindset, the resources, that whole immersion thing.
Right.
But what about the more technical aspects of learning a language? We haven't really touched on things like grammar and vocabulary.
Right.
Where do those fit in?
Yeah, and that's where things can get a little tricky. It's easy to get bogged down in all the details and rules.
Oh, for sure.
But Emma and John had a really, refreshing take on all this.
Okay, I'm interested.
They said, grammar shouldn't be this big roadblock.
Oh, really?
They actually suggested focusing on communication first and then letting those grammatical rules fall into place more naturally with practice.
So don't get too hung up on memorizing all the rules right away.
Exactly. It's more about getting comfortable with actually using the language in real-life situations.
That's interesting. So fluency isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about being able to express yourself and understand others.
Precisely. And that's something they emphasize a lot. Fluency is not about perfection.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. Emma and John seem to be big proponents of making language learning fun and accessible rather than this, rigid academic pursuit.
I think you're right. It's about finding what works for you, embracing those mistakes
Yeah,
and focusing on communication over perfection.
I like that.
And they actually backed up their whole approach with some pretty compelling evidence.
Okay.
They shared some research that showed learners who adopt a more relaxed and, playful attitude towards learning, they actually tend to progress faster
Oh, wow.
and they retain the information better too.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense when you really think about it. Like when you're stressed or anxious, your brain's not exactly in learning mode.
Right? It's like trying to learn a new dance move, but you're so focused on getting every step perfect.
Uh-huh.
You tense up, you stumble,
Right.
But when you let loose, feel the rhythm, you pick it up so much quicker.
I love that analogy.
It's all about finding that flow.
Okay, so we've covered the mindset, resources, immersion play. But what about some practical tips? Like, how do we actually put all this into action? What were Emma and John's suggestions?
They had some really cool ideas for how to fit language learning into your everyday life.
Okay.
One that stood out was this concept of microlearning.
Microlearning.
Yeah, basically the idea is instead of trying to squeeze in like a whole hour-long lesson,
Yeah.
you break up your study time into smaller chunks,
Oh.
like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there.
Much more manageable.
Right. So throughout the day, maybe listen to a quick podcast, do some flashcards, read an English article online.
Yeah, feels way more doable than trying to block off this huge chunk of time.
And it's all about those small wins, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like those fitness apps that tell you to hit 10,000 steps a day.
Exactly.
You don't need to run a marathon, just those little consistent efforts. They add up.
I like that.
So we're talking about apps. Did Emma and John have any specific recommendations for language learning apps?
Oh, they did.
Okay.
They're big fans of using technology to boost learning. They specifically mentioned Duolingo,
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Babbel, and Memrise.
Okay.
All
Oh.
great options for, interactive exercises, vocab building, grammar practice.
I've actually tried Duolingo before.
Have you?
It's kind of addictive. It's like a game, but you're actually learning something useful.
I know, right?
Have you ever used any of those language learning apps?
I've tried a few. I think they're really effective, especially for getting that solid foundation,
Yeah.
vocab, grammar. But it's also important, I think, to mix it up.
Oh, yeah.
Balance the app-based learning with some real-world experiences.
Look, what kind of stuff?
Having actual conversations with native speakers. Watching movies without subtitles. Reading books in English.
It's like you can learn to cook from a recipe book,
Right.
but it's not the same as actually getting in the kitchen and experimenting.
And you both?
And that's where the podcast really took an inspiring turn.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
They shared the story about a guy named Ravi from India
Okay.
who had really struggled with English in school.
Mm-hmm.
And his dream was to work abroad, but he just wasn't confident in his English skills. And it was holding him back.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah. So what did Ravi do to overcome that?
Well, he decided to just take matters into his own hands.
Good for him.
He went all in on immersing himself in English, every way he could think of.
Wow. Like what?
He started watching English movies with subtitles, listened to English music, even began reading the news in English every single day.
That's impressive. What dedication.
I know, right? And that wasn't all.
Oh, there's more.
He found a language exchange partner online,
Cool.
so they would have regular conversations.
Oh.
And he even made this conscious effort to think in English throughout the day, even when he was alone.
Really? Like just switch your internal monologue to a different language.
Exactly, like constantly practicing, even when you're not actively studying.
That's a really good idea. I've never thought of doing that before.
Give it a try.
I think I will. So what happened to Ravi? Did his efforts pay off?
Oh, they totally did, big time.
Good for him.
He ended up landing his dream job at a company in Dubai,
No way.
where he uses English every single day, talking to colleagues, clients, from all over the world.
That is so inspiring. It really shows that with the right mindset, the right approach, you can achieve anything.
It's all about perseverance,
Yeah.
the transformative power of language learning.
Okay, so we've heard Ravi's story, we've talked to tips, resources, but as we start wrapping up, what are some of the key takeaways here for our listener?
Let me think.
What are those like nuggets of wisdom they can take away?
Well, one of the biggest things I think is to remember that learning English doesn't have to be this big, scary, overwhelming task.
Yeah, it can feel that way sometimes.
By breaking it down into smaller steps,
Right.
finding those resources that really speak to you,
Right.
and accepting that you're going to make mistakes along the way,
Right.
you can make some serious progress.
It's all about the journey.
Right? It is. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah. And fluency isn't about being perfect either.
Exactly.
It's about communicating clearly and confidently. And that takes practice, patience, and a willingness to kind of put yourself out there.
It does. And as Ravi's story showed us, the rewards of mastering English can be life-changing.
Oh, yeah.
It unlocks new opportunities.
Hmm.
It expands your horizons, lets you connect with people from all over the globe.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into learning English, what's really resonating with you? What's that one thing you're going to take away and actually use?
Oh, that's tough. So many good points.
Yeah.
I think maybe the idea of just fitting in those little micro-learning moments,
Yeah, bite-sized learning.
exactly, throughout the day. Or maybe it's remembering that progress isn't always a straight line. You'll hit plateaus, maybe even a few setbacks.
It's a journey.
But it's about staying with it, finding those ways to get back into it.
I'm with you there. For me, it's definitely that whole new perspective on making mistakes, seeing them as like stepping stones instead of failures.
Right. It's powerful.
It is. It really is.
And think about what opens up when you're not so afraid to make those mistakes.
You're more likely to just go for it.
You try new things, have more conversations, really immerse yourself.
Exactly. It's like finally taking off those training wheels.
Yeah.
You can ride the bike without worrying about falling.
I like that. And don't forget, the journey itself can be just as rewarding as actually reaching the destination.
Oh, absolutely.
Discovering new cultures, connecting with people from all over, broadening your understanding of the world.
Those are some amazing benefits.
All thanks to learning English.
Speaking of connecting with people, Emma and John ended the podcast with this really interesting question.
Oh, yeah.
If you could have a fluent conversation in English with anyone in the world,
Okay.
who would it be and what would you talk about?
That's a great question to think about. Really makes you realize how language can bridge those gaps between people.
Open up new ways of communicating.
Exactly.
Imagine all the conversations you could have,
The stories you could share.
different perspectives you could gain,
It really is like having a superpower.
the ability to connect with anyone from anywhere through this shared language of English.
So as we leave you to ponder that question,
Yeah.
we want to encourage everyone listening to embrace this journey of learning English.
Absolutely.
It's a gift,
It is.
one that keeps on giving.
And remember, every step you take, even the small ones, they all bring you closer to fluency.
To a world of possibilities.
We're so excited to see where your English adventure takes you.